Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Outside your window, the world feels calm, still almost. Streetlights pool amber onto the pavement, casting shadows that stretch longer than they should. Maybe a cat slips past, its paws silent, tail twitching like it knows something you don't. You lie back, watching the ceiling fan spin lazily, hypnotically, and you start to wonder, is all of this really real? Because here's the catch. You probably won't survive this without at least some cracks in your worldview. The more you think about it, the less certain you become. That pillow under your head, mostly empty space, the soft rustling in the trees, your brain just interpreting vibrating air, the thoughts swirling behind your eyelids, constructed by a brain that's constantly editing, erasing, and even inventing. You're walking around inside a hallucination that just happens to sync up with other people's hallucinations. Most of the time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking across a tiled floor. Each step taps out a rhythm, tap, 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 and yet, if you could zoom in, you'd see there is no real floor at all. Just molecules hovering at polite distances from each other, barely touching, more empty than full. The tiles under your feet feel real, though, cold, textured. How strange that such a fleeting, ghostly collection of particles can feel so certain. This is your first clue that reality isn't quite what it pretends to be. That crack in the canvas, this whole business of believing in a physical, reliable world, has been with us for millennia. Ancient Greek philosophers whispered about it, calling the physical realm a shadow play. In modern times, we wrap those shadows in data, ran them through supercolliders, and still couldn't pin down what was real in any final way. Your senses feed you stories, beautiful, convincing stories. But those stories are stitched together on a lag, filtered through biases, and shaped by what your brain expects to see. Take that classic optical illusion, the checkerboard where two tiles that appear vastly different in shade are actually identical. You've probably seen it, but even when you know the truth, your eyes still lie to you. That's not just a party trick, that's your entire experience of reality. And it's not just vision. Every sense you rely on is subject to manipulation. In 1962, a team of researchers proved that people can be made to feel limbs that aren't theirs with just a rubber hand and a few synchronized brushstrokes. Your brain, always trying to conserve effort, says, sure, that hand's mine now. The line between what is and what's imagined, perilously thin. Historians still argue whether early humans thought of reality as objective or spiritual. Some say prehistoric cave art was just the equivalent of Instagram posts, "Look what I killed today." Others argue these were portals, attempts to conjure or commune with something beyond the physical. What's certain is that our ancestors didn't assume the world they saw was all there was. In many indigenous traditions, waking life is just one layer, one dream among many. Quirky side note, the Terona people of Colombia raised their priests, or mamas, in complete darkness for the first 9 years of life. No sunlight, no visual input, just training in perception, storytelling, and cosmology. When they were finally allowed to see the physical world, it was considered just one of many realities they had to interpret. Meanwhile, modern scientists can now create entire sensory environments that don't exist. Virtual reality headsets trick your brain into standing on a cliff, even as your feet touch carpet. Researchers in Tokyo built a VR setup that simulates smells and wind. Imagine getting seasick in your living room because your brain believes you're on a ship. You probably will. And yet, we crave this illusion. Even when we suspect the world is a trick of light and pattern, we cling to the feeling of realness like it's a warm blanket. Because what's the alternative? That your memories are unreliable, that the cup you set down yesterday might not have existed in the way you remember. That's uncomfortable stuff. Your brain doesn't like uncomfortable, it likes predictable. That's why, even in your dreams, where the logic of space and time turns to putty, you don't usually question things. A purple elephant walks past in your high school cafeteria and your dreaming brain just goes, "Yep, that tracks." Why? Because your internal model of reality is more about coherence than truth. It prefers consistency to accuracy. And this is where the illusion really starts to deepen. You're not just experiencing a filtered world, you're experiencing a simulated one. Not in the computer chip Elon Musk sends, don't worry, we'll get to him later, but in the way your brain runs internal code. It predicts, constantly. Every time you move your eyes, your brain guesses what you'll see before the signal even arrives. The fact that things usually line up, that's not proof of reality, that's proof of a good guesser. You don't see reality. You see the version of it your brain thinks is most useful. There's something quietly terrifying about that, but also something oddly freeing. Because if reality is a painting, constantly retouched by the artist that lives in your skull, then maybe you're not trapped in a rigid world. Maybe you're floating through a story your brain keeps improvising. And that story, it can bend. So take another deep breath. Let that illusion settle. Let the idea that nothing is quite what it seems, your couch, your cat, your cup of tea, sink in like the first note of a song that will never end. Reality may be cracked, but the pattern it makes, beautiful. You blink and the world is back, or at least your brain's version of it is. That ceiling fan, still spinning. That shadow on the wall still looks like a coat hanger, but part of you isn't so sure anymore. Your senses, you're starting to realize, aren't neutral messengers. They're performers, actors in a play you didn't audition for. And the stage, it's entirely in your head. You don't actually see the world. You see a hallucination your brain creates using the faintest whispers of light, motion, and contrast. Right now, your eyes are picking up photons bouncing off your phone, or your ceiling, or the swirling edge of your blanket. But they're not seeing the world directly. Instead, they send those photons through a tangled mess of optic nerves, which bounce signals around your brain like overexcited toddlers with glitter. Eventually, if everything goes smoothly, you get a clearish picture of the world. But that picture, it's not raw footage. It's post-processed, auto-corrected, color-graded, and captioned. And sometimes the captions are wrong. There's a part of your brain nestled deep in the visual cortex whose job is to guess. Constantly, it fills in gaps, smooths over shadows, invents connections. You look at a few lines on a page and suddenly, boom, it's a face. You look at clouds and see a dog or Abraham Lincoln or a sad marshmallow. You're not crazy. You're just equipped with a pattern-matching machine that would rather be wrong than confused. Historians still argue whether ancient humans thought dreams were just another form of vision. Some cultures believe dreams were more real than waking life, a place where truth came unfiltered. Others treated dreams as unreliable, chaotic noise. What's clear is that for most of history, humans didn't draw a hard line between vision and imagination. Seeing meant believing, but sometimes believing shaped the very thing you saw. Here's a fun little trick. Stare at a spinning spiral for 30 seconds. Then look at the back of your hand. Watch your skin crawl and ripple like it's alive. Nothing's actually moving. Your eyes are still. But your brain, used to the swirl, overcompensates and distorts the world. A cheap illusion, but oddly persuasive, like the rest of your visual experience. Take motion. You think you're seeing continuous movement on your screen when someone waves, but what you're really seeing is a rapid sequence of still images. Your brain fills in the gaps like an overconfident animator. The same principle is why movies work. A projector flickers at just the right speed and boom, reality, or something that feels like it. But your brain can go even further. It can simulate entire scenes without any external input at all. Close your eyes and picture a lemon. Really imagine it, its shiny, dimpled skin. The way it smells when sliced. That acidity zing on your tongue. Maybe your mouth just watered a little. That wasn't the lemon, that was theater. Your brain summoned a memory, added props, pulled the lighting, triggered your salivary glands all from scratch. A fringe neuroscientific theory suggests that consciousness is less like a spotlight and more like a stage manager yelling directions from behind a curtain. You only become aware of something after your brain has already decided how to interpret it. You're the last to know, really. The lights come on, the scene plays out, and only then does the narrator in your head say, "Ah yes, I see what's going on." Except you didn't. Not first. Consider the case of blind sight. Patients who are technically blind due to brain damage, yet can still guess where objects are with eerie accuracy. They don't consciously see anything, yet something in their brain does. It's as if the theater of perception continues backstage, without the main actor ever stepping onto the stage. And then there's the auditory side of things. Ever heard your name being called in a crowded room when no one was talking to you? That's your brain's alert system scanning the noise for anything vaguely familiar, and occasionally throwing false positives. Better safe than sorry, evolution says. Your brain would rather you look like a confused meerkat than miss something important. Historically, philosophers like George Berkeley argued that perception is reality. That if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, it doesn't exist in any meaningful way. Wild take, maybe, but in a strange twist, quantum physics might actually back him up. In some interpretations, particles don't decide their properties until they're observed. The act of looking changes the thing being looked at. Creepy, right? Quirky detour. In the 17th century, natural philosopher Margaret Cavendish argued that all matter had a form of consciousness. Yes, even rocks and rain. Her peers laughed her off. But today, panpsychism, a theory that consciousness might be a fundamental aspect of matter, is gaining a weird kind of traction. Imagine your coffee table is a little bit aware of being a coffee table. Sweet dreams. So here you are, relying on a sensory system that, at best, is a talented liar. It lies to protect you, to keep you efficient, to avoid the horror of total confusion. You see what you expect to see. You hear what you're tuned to hear, and you feel what the story requires you to feel. But it goes deeper. Sometimes, even when you're not sensing anything, your brain keeps the show running. Phantom limb syndrome is a perfect example. Amputees can feel an arm or leg that's no longer there. Sometimes it itches. Sometimes it hurts. The brain, used to constant feedback, keeps filling in the missing signals. It doesn't care whether the body part is physically gone. It just assumes the show must go on. In this strange theater of perception, you're not the director. You're not even the audience. You're more like the confused actor who just walked on stage, glancing around, wondering what scene they're in. And the cues, they're improvised, whispered to you by a brain that's guessing what should come next. So next time you look at something, anything, a coffee cup, a mirror, a reflection of a reflection of a reflection, pause. Ask yourself how much of what you're seeing is really there, and how much is being kindly invented for your convenience. Reality may be a shared dream, but your version of it, entirely custom-built. Your fingers tap against the table wood, probably. Feels solid, unyielding, but of course now you know better. You wiggle your hand a little, press harder, and feel the resistance push back. That pressure. It's not the atoms of your skin mashing into the atoms of the table like bumper cars. It's force fields, electromagnetic ones, repelling each other politely. That touch sensation, just your brain interpreting the repulsion. Like two magnets trying to kiss, and always being held apart by invisible rules. Zoom in far enough, way beyond what your eyeballs can manage, and the illusion crumbles into particles and probability. Every atom in that wooden surface is more empty space than matter. Electrons dance around a nucleus the way gossip circles through a small town, chaotically, constantly, and without ever actually colliding. If your hand were made of anything even remotely solid, it would just pass through the table like a ghost. But it's not. Neither is the table. You're both mostly vacuum and a lot of attitude. It gets better. Even those tiny particles, the electrons, protons, neutrons, aren't solid in any familiar sense. The electron, for example, has no known internal structure. It might not even be a thing in the traditional sense, but more of a probability field, a kind of fuzzy maybe cloud. And the nucleus, that's mostly empty too, which means the atoms that make up everything you call real, chairs, trees, moonlight on your skin, are built like scaffolding around absence. You, me, the cat sleeping on your keyboard, we're all just loose clouds pretending to be statues. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek atomists like Democritus really grasped how wild their ideas were. He proposed that everything was made of indivisible particles, atomos, scooting around in a void. At the time, people thought he was being metaphorical, but in retrospect, he might have been closer to quantum physics than anyone expected, especially for a guy without access to a microscope or a tick-tock explainer. And it turns out, solidity is one of the best magic tricks ever pulled. We believe in it because it's useful. It's practical to think that walls are solid, that spoons won't pass through soup, that people don't just dissolve mid-sentence. But at the level of subatomic reality, those assumptions are just the polite agreements of a universe doing its best to hold it together. Here's a delightful fringe tidbit. There's a real theory floating around, still debated of course, that all matter might be made of vibrating strings. Not yarn, but teeny tiny strings of energy, oscillating in multiple dimensions. String theory. The name makes it sound simple, like something you could tie around your finger to remember to buy milk. But it's actually terrifyingly complex, full of hidden dimensions and math that makes normal humans cry. Even if we set aside the strings, regular old quantum mechanics already breaks your brain. Particles don't sit still. They exist in clouds of probability. You can know where something is or how fast it's going, but not both at the same time. That's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and it's not just a technicality. It means the universe isn't built on fixed rules like a Lego set. It's more like jazz, fluid, unpredictable, and sometimes a little incoherent. The weirdest part, none of this strangeness matters at the scale of your everyday life. You can still pour coffee without it teleporting through the mug, but zoom in, and reality starts behaving like a stubborn dream. Nothing has a defined position until it's measured. No path is taken until it's observed. The world at the tiniest level is like a coin perpetually mid-flip, neither heads nor tails, just a maybe. That coffee table under your hand, it's buzzing, not metaphorically, literally. The atoms are vibrating even now. The only reason it doesn't burst into flames from sheer motion is because the vibrations are controlled, symmetrical, bound by the laws of thermodynamics. But still, every object around you is quietly jittering, like it knows a secret it can't tell. You are a galaxy of particles, and each one is more mystery than substance. Scientists have even suggested that particles borrow energy from nothingness. The vacuum isn't empty. It's brimming with virtual particles, popping in and out of existence like quantum hiccups. It's called quantum foam, and it sounds adorable until you realize it's the frothing madness beneath all reality. Here's a strange thought to roll around like a lozenge. Every atom in your body was forged in a star. Not poetic, Literal. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, born from the heart of dying suns. So not only are you mostly empty space, you're also recycled stardust, barely glued together by chance and laws we still don't fully understand. You're a shimmering cloud pretending to be a person, walking around and worrying about laundry. Quirky footnote. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of thought and emotion, not the brain. They even threw out the brain during mummification, scooping it out through the nose like old yogurt. If only they knew the brain was the real stage for all this illusion, the meat computer processing the fact that you're made of vibrating nothing. So next time you touch something, your phone, your favorite pen, the edge of a warm blanket, pause. Remember, you're not actually touching it. The electrons in your fingers and the electrons in that object are doing an intricate, invisible dance, keeping a polite distance like introverts at a party. It only feels like contact. Your brain is tricked by the pushback. Like a bouncer saying, you can't come in, but you can press your face against the glass. You live in a world of boundaries that don't truly exist. Solid things aren't solid. Objects don't truly touch. And you're a walking cloud of particles, kept together by nothing more than mathematical probabilities, blind luck, and a nervous system that really wants you to believe in furniture. But the illusion holds, and it holds well. You don't fall through the floor. Your coffee doesn't float away. The world feels consistent because your brain makes it feel that way. It's a game of quantum poker, and you've been handed a full house of comforting lies. Still, there's something gentle in that deception, something elegant. After all, if the universe must trick you, at least it's doing it beautifully. There's a flicker in the firelight, something you almost notice, then lose. You sit still, listening to your breath, half aware that everything around you might be playing a part in a much older performance. This illusion, this spectacle of color and shape and texture, didn't start with modern science or flashing screens. No, the idea that reality itself is a kind of trick has been haunting humanity for thousands of years. It's not just a glitch in your VR headset or a misfiring neuron. It's baked deep into philosophy, myth, and the old, stubborn question: what is real, and how do you know? You squint into the shadows, and suddenly you're not just a person in a room. You're a prisoner in a cave, not metaphorically, literally, according to Plato. His famous allegory of the cave, written over 2,000 years ago, imagined people chained inside a cavern since birth, facing a blank wall. Behind them, puppeteers pass objects in front of a fire, casting moving shadows on that wall. The prisoners. They think the shadows are reality, because that's all they've ever known. When one finally escapes and sees the true world outside, he's stunned by the light. And when he returns to the cave to tell the others, they laugh at him. Or worse. Plato wasn't just being poetic. He was laying down a fundamental idea, that your senses may be lying to you and truth might exist beyond their reach. Historians still argue whether Plato saw the allegory as a psychological metaphor or a spiritual truth, or maybe both. Either way, it echoes eerily with modern theories of perception and simulation. Different tech, same haunting suspicion. Even earlier than Plato, ancient Indian philosophy was already throwing shade at reality. In the Upanishads, there's the concept of Maya, the illusion that makes the material world appear real. Maya isn't just a misperception, it's an active cosmic force, wrapping illusion around your mind like a weighted blanket. The real world, the eternal, unchanging truth, is hidden behind the glitter of everyday experience. It's not just that the world feels fake. It is fake, and your job is to wake up. Fringe tidbit. In certain Buddhist schools, even time and causality are illusions. The idea that this causes that is considered a convenience, not a law. Like when your phone rings and you assume someone wanted to talk to you. Maybe. Or maybe it's just another ripple in the dream. The illusion of reality isn't limited to Eastern thought or Greek philosophers. Across countless indigenous traditions, shamans and mystics talk about seeing through the world, stepping sideways into a truer layer of existence. The Australian Aboriginal concept of the dream time isn't just about dreams. It's the sacred, eternal reality that underlies waking life. What we call reality is the temporary part, the illusion. And you, sitting there with your blanket and tea and very modern lighting system, are no less susceptible. You're part of this long line of dreamers poking at the edges of the projection. Your fingers reach for the fabric, but the fabric keeps slipping away. Science eventually picked up the philosophical baton and ran with it straight into weirdness. Newton gave us a clockwork universe, tidy, predictable, reassuring, but even he had doubts. He was obsessed with alchemy, constantly wondering whether hidden forces shaped what we see. Then came Einstein, who bent space and time into a single stretchy sheet. The more you look at the world, the more it bends away from what you thought was true. And now, physicists consider models where our universe might be one of many, a bubble in an infinite multiverse, or a hologram encoded on the edge of space. Reality, it seems, may not be the full package. It might just be the visible portion of something infinitely deeper, like watching a movie through a mail slot. But despite all these centuries of doubt, we're stubborn. We crave certainty. That's why your brain latches onto patterns even if they're wrong. You see faces in clouds. You feel watched in an empty room. You believe the world is stable because instability is scary. Who wants to live inside a dream where the rules can shift mid-step? Here's a fun historical footnote. In medieval Europe, it was believed that reality could be directly manipulated by the divine. Miracles weren't glitches. They were reminders that the natural world was only ever provisional. A thin crust over something much stranger. You could wake up tomorrow and find the sun rising in the west, and the church would just say, "See, told you God's in charge." Modern people scoff at that. We build satellites and launch rockets and scoff at ancient mystics. But then we run into quantum entanglement, where two particles affect each other instantly across space, and suddenly the universe starts whispering again. Nothing makes full sense. The puzzle has too many missing pieces. Which brings you back to now. Your breath, your heartbeat, the quiet hum of a world that only sometimes feels real. Maybe you've always suspected something was off, like a painting where the shadows don't quite match the objects. You go through the motions, eating, walking, answering emails, but somewhere deep in the corner of your awareness, something tapping at the glass. Some scientists argue that this suspicion, that there's more to the world than meets the eye, is a byproduct of self-awareness. When your brain developed enough to reflect on itself, it started asking questions it couldn't fully answer. Why am I here? What is this place? What happens when I stop existing? And in the absence of answers, it did what brains always do. It made up stories, layered them like wallpaper, called the pattern reality, and hoped you wouldn't peel it off. But you're peeling it now, slowly, gently, maybe just a corner, just enough to see the cracks beneath the canvas. And still the illusion holds because it's beautiful. It has color and sound and symmetry. It has kindness and grief and toast. The fact that it might be fake doesn't make it any less meaningful. If anything, the fragility makes it feel more precious. Like a dream you want to remember, even though you know it will fade. So you sit back, listen to the firelight, and let the cave walls flicker. You stare at an apple. It's shiny, red, almost comically red, the kind of red that cartoons used to say, "Look, food." You pick it up. It feels cool in your palm, its skin waxy and smooth. You bite in. Crunch, sweet, tangy. Your tongue lights up with flavor and texture. And in all of this, every part of this delicious little ritual, not a single atom of red was ever involved. That's the uncomfortable truth. Color is a lie. A convincing, persistent, multisensory lie. There's no such thing as red out in the world. What you call red is just a specific wavelength of electromagnetic radiation, somewhere around 700 nanometers. Your eyes, marvels of bioengineering that they are, catch that wavelength and send a signal to your brain. Your brain, bless its imaginative little circuits, interprets that as red. Not because red exists, but because it's a useful shortcut. Take away your visual system and nothing is colored. The universe is just a silent storm of radiation, light waves, and particles bouncing off each other like caffeinated pinballs. Color happens only in your mind. You might as well say the universe is painted with ideas, because that's all color is, an internal experience, an illusion you happen to share with other humans. Or most humans. Some people have tetrachromacy, a condition where they have 4 types of color-detecting cone cells in their eyes instead of the usual 3. They can see hues you can't even imagine. What does that extra dimension of color feel like? No one knows. You can't describe a color to someone who's never seen it. Try explaining blue to someone born blind. All you've got are metaphors, and metaphors don't hit the retina. Historians still argue whether the ancient Greeks even saw the color blue. Seriously. In the Odyssey, Homer describes the sea as wine dark, not blue. The sky, barely mentioned in terms of color. Some scholars believe that ancient languages developed color words gradually, first for black and white, then red, then yellow and green. Blue came last, not because it wasn't there, but because no one had the conceptual bucket to pour it into. The sky was blue because no one had yet decided to call it that. And yet color feels so real, you can almost taste it. That's called synesthesia, by the way, when senses bleed into each other. Some people hear music and see colors, others taste words. It's rare, but not that rare. Your brain likes shortcuts, and sometimes it rewires things creatively. It's like a sleep-deprived intern plugging cables into whichever port fits. The result? Rainbows you can hear, songs you can chew. But even if your wiring is typical, your color perception is wildly unreliable. Ever argued with someone over whether a dress is blue and black or white and gold? That viral moment wasn't just internet fluff. It was a revelation. A single photo under ambiguous lighting exposed just how much your brain fills in color based on context. You weren't seeing the dress. You were seeing your brain's best guess at what the lighting should be. One person's guess made the fabric shadowed. Another made it lit. 2 realities, both wrong, both convinced they were right. Color is context. It shifts based on background, light source, angle, expectation. Your brain is constantly color correcting like an Instagram filter, trying to make the world look right, even when right doesn't exist. Optical illusions like the checker shadow effect, where identical shades appear wildly different, prove that your eyes are less like cameras and more like unreliable narrators with a flair for drama. Here's a quirky corner case: mantis shrimp. These ocean-dwelling technicolor bugs have up to 16 types of photoreceptor cells. Scientists once believed this meant they could see a mind-blowing spectrum of colors. Turns out, maybe not. Some studies suggest they actually process color more crudely than humans, like flipping between presets instead of blending shades. Imagine owning a 64 crayon box but only ever using 3. Sad, really. Still, their eyes are weird enough to make you question what color even is. If you could borrow their vision for a day, would flowers scream in ultraviolet? Would the ocean glow with hues you've never named? Or would you just get a migraine? And speaking of seeing differently, color blindness affects around 1 in 12 men. Usually, it means trouble distinguishing red from green, which makes traffic lights a fun daily gamble. But there's a powerful side note. Some colorblind people, when fitted with special glasses that correct the deficiency, weep the first time they see certain hues. Not because the glasses restored a function, but because they revealed an illusion they didn't know they were missing. In a way, you're no different. Every color you think you know, every lush green forest, every neon sign, every sunset, is a neurological painting rendered on the fly. It's not in the world, it's in you. So when you admire a painting, or a sunrise, or a painfully stylish throw pillow, remember, you're not seeing what's there. You're seeing a color-coded summary, a visual poem written in response to a photon's journey. Which makes you wonder, what else are you not seeing? Because light only covers a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. We're blind to everything outside it. No infrared, no ultraviolet. Bees can see UV patterns on flowers that are completely invisible to us. Snakes can track prey in infrared. We're just stumbling through a tiny keyhole of perception, shouting, "This is real," while most of reality walks right past, politely ignoring us. In short, your reality is painted with lies. Beautiful ones, strategic ones, but lies all the same. So look around. That warm glow of lamplight, just photons bouncing off molecules. That deep blue shirt, a color your brain invented to process electromagnetic leftovers. That realness you feel, a hallucination you happen to agree on with other people, a shared dream drawn in electric pastels. And still it matters, because while the color red doesn't exist out there, it can still mean danger, or passion, or the front door of your childhood home. Your brain attaches memory and emotion to those invented hues, creating meaning from nonsense. That's the real trick. Your brain doesn't just accept illusions, it loves them. It builds its whole world out of them. And if you're lucky, you get to call that world beautiful. Tick, tick, tick. Your clock keeps pulsing forward, each second neat and identical like a digital march. You think time is linear, predictable, something you can measure by the inch if you had the right kind of ruler. But the truth is slipperier. It doesn't march, it melts, and your experience of it, mostly made up. You wake up on a Monday morning and time drags like wet socks. Then Friday night hits and time sprints off, leaving you breathless and wondering where the week went. A 10-minute wait in a doctor's office feels like a year, but 3 hours at dinner with someone you like, gone in what feels like 20 minutes. What gives? Your brain doesn't measure time like a stopwatch. It estimates it like a moody film editor, cutting and rearranging based on interest, fear, pleasure, and surprise. Your sense of time isn't fixed, it's sculpted. And at the scientific level, things get even weirder. Einstein shattered our comforting timeline with his theory of relativity. According to him, time isn't some universal metronome. It bends and flexes depending on how fast you're moving or how close you are to a massive object. Time moves slower near a black hole. Literally, it stretches. An astronaut parked near the event horizon would experience minutes while years pass for someone back on Earth. That's not fiction, it's physics. Clocks run slower in strong gravity, which means, technically, your feet are aging a tiny bit slower than your head right now. Sleep tight. Historians still argue whether early cultures understood time as linear or cyclical. The Greeks leaned toward linearity, time as an arrow. Meanwhile, many Eastern philosophies saw time as circular, death feeding life, endings becoming beginnings, forever and ever like cosmic laundry on spin cycle. The ancient Mayans tracked enormous time cycles, backduns lasting centuries, believing that every end was also a return. But then quantum physics came in, and time got even murkier. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that time doesn't really flow at all. Instead, it's just another dimension like space, laid out in its entirety. Past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. It's just that you, poor meat-bound observer, are forced to experience the universe one sliver at a time, like flipping through a flipbook. The illusion of flow is created by memory. Your brain stitching frames together into a narrative so it all makes sense. And sometimes the stitching goes off the rails. In high-stress situations, time slows dramatically. Car accidents, sudden falls, life-threatening moments. You've probably heard people describe how time seemed to stretch. Not because the universe hit the brakes, but because your brain kicked into overdrive. It recorded more detail per second, and later, when you recall it, the event feels longer. Again, not objective, just your brain fudging the edit. Quirky side note: in some neurological conditions, like temporal lobe epilepsy, people can experience intense distortions of time. Minutes feel like hours. Entire lifetimes can pass in a few seconds. One person claimed to have lived a full, complex life in a dream that lasted under 5 minutes. Their brain, it seems, wrote a very long novel in an extremely short window. Even your sleep distorts time. Dreams can contain scenes that feel endless, yet the actual REM episode might only be a few minutes long. You could dream of climbing mountains, falling in love, getting betrayed by a talking walrus, and still wake up to find only 8 minutes have passed. Time, in dreams, stretches and compresses like warm taffy. That's because your internal clock, the circadian rhythm, is only loosely tied to objective time. It's more like a biological suggestion. Light cues, hormone cycles, and temperature shifts help regulate it, but your perception of time's passing is wildly context-dependent. Ever been on a long flight across time zones? Your body gets confused. Jet lag is your internal clock trying to resync, like an orchestra desperately trying to find the beat again after a messy drum solo. The ancient Egyptians didn't have clocks as we know them, but they did use sundials and water clocks to measure time. They saw time in terms of divine cycles, the sun god Ra sailing across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. Time wasn't just numbers, it was sacred motion, a divine rhythm. Today we treat time like a commodity. We spend it, we save it, we waste it. But really what we're wasting is our own attention. Time doesn't care, it doesn't tick. That ticking you hear, just a sound someone made to give structure to chaos. And yet we cling to time's illusion as if it were law. We measure birthdays. We dread deadlines. We place so much meaning on something that might be a local feature of human consciousness, not a universal constant. Some physicists now propose that time itself might emerge from entanglement, quantum information becoming entangled in such a way that a sense of past and future arises. In other words, time might not be fundamental. It might be a side effect. Let that sink in. A side effect. Like static in your mental radio. Like a polite hallucination designed to keep you from wandering into traffic. There's something deeply eerie about the idea that time might be fake, that the past isn't behind you and the future is ahead. They're all just there, layered, fixed. Maybe in some dimension your childhood is still happening. Maybe in another your future self is already reminiscing about now. You sipping tea, you wondering what's next, you floating in this illusion of time, asking questions that the universe might already have answered. But here, the trick: even if time is fake, the feeling of it is. The nostalgia when you hear an old song, real. The ache of waiting for someone you love, also real. The way a good moment feels like it ends too soon, painfully real. Because your experience is the reality. Even if time is an illusion, you're living inside it, and that matters. The minutes you spend listening, wondering, drifting through thoughts that make no sense but somehow feel right, those minutes are yours. So go ahead, watch the clock, count the stars, remember the past and imagine the future. Just know that you're moving through something bendy, stitched together and strangely personal. A pocket-sized timeline your brain keeps updating. And somewhere far beyond your perception, time is laughing quietly. Not ticking, just waiting for you to notice. Take a deep breath, Go on. Inhale through your nose. What do you smell? Maybe nothing, maybe something faint. Laundry detergent, the last traces of your dinner, or the ghost of an old perfume clinging to fabric. Whatever it is, it hits you instantly, skips all the usual filters, and goes straight to that soft animal part of your brain that remembers things you didn't even know you forgot. That's the strange power of scent. It's memory in molecule form. But here's the twist. Even when you smell something, you might not be smelling anything at all. Let's back up. Smell is supposedly simple. Tiny airborne molecules drift into your nostrils, land on receptors in your olfactory epithelium, and send signals to your brain. Boom, smell. Except no, because sometimes no actual molecules are involved. You can imagine a smell and activate the same regions of your brain. You can hallucinate scents. People with certain neurological conditions report phantom smells, burning toast, lilacs, sulfur, when nothing is there. And then there's the placebo effect. Spray someone with water and tell them it's perfume, and suddenly they're describing notes of sandalwood and citrus. Historians still argue whether ancient civilizations understood the link between smell and memory. The Egyptians certainly held scent in high regard. They packed tombs with fragrant oils, believing the smell would help guide the dead. In ancient Rome, the wealthy doused themselves and their homes in perfumes, not just to mask odor but to evoke emotion, to signal power, to wrap themselves in invisible armor. But whether they grasped how deeply smell could stir memory, that's still debated. What we do know is that smell bypasses the thalamus, the brain's usual sensory relay station. Instead, it heads straight to the limbic system, home of emotion and memory. That's why the whiff of a certain cologne can send you hurtling through time, not because you wanted to remember, but because the smell remembered for you. Here's a fun fringe fact. During World War I, soldiers sometimes experienced olfactory hallucinations after exposure to gas or trauma. They'd smell trench mud or rotting meat years later in quiet civilian life. Not PTSD in the visual sense, but scent-based flashbacks. It's called phantasmia, and it's both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Now take this a step further. What if the thing you're smelling, the flour, the bread, the rain, isn't actually there in the way you think? Because scent, like all your senses, doesn't reveal the world directly. It's a translation. You're not experiencing the molecules. You're experiencing your brain's interpretation of their presence. That earthy smell after rain, called petrichor, is partly caused by geosmin, a compound released by soil-dwelling bacteria. But geosmin itself is earthy. It doesn't come pre-labeled. Your brain learned to assign that smell a meaning. And sometimes it gets it very wrong. Think about anosmia, the loss of the sense of smell. For some people, it's temporary. For others, it's permanent. But the psychological toll, surprisingly intense. Because without smell, food tastes dull, memories fade. Danger becomes harder to detect: smoke, spoiled milk, gas leaks. Some people with anosmia even report feeling unreal, like they're living in a fog. As if without smell, the world loses depth. But smell isn't just about memory and survival. It's about identity. You have a personal scent signature, shaped by genetics, diet, even mood. Dogs, with their hypersensitive noses, can detect shifts in human emotion through subtle changes in body odor. Some studies suggest that infants can recognize their mother's scent within days of birth, long before they can make sense of sight or sound. And then there's the weird science of smellscapes, the sensory maps of cities, forests, or homes. A hospital has a smell, so does a subway, so does your favorite bookstore. Those smells tell you more than signs ever could. They anchor you. They become part of the illusion of place. Now imagine walking through a completely sterile environment. No scent, no context, just blank air. Even if it looked real, it wouldn't feel real. You'd feel like a ghost. Because we don't just see our environments, we inhale them. There's a little-known historical nugget here. In the Victorian era, people believed miasma, or bad air, caused disease. It wasn't entirely wrong. Foul air often meant poor sanitation, but the obsession with smell led to some bizarre hygiene habits. People carried scented handkerchiefs, burned herbs, and drenched themselves in colognes to protect themselves. And oddly, it worked, at least sometimes. Because avoiding bad smells often meant avoiding truly unsanitary conditions. But let's step even further out. What about artificial scents? Candles, sprays, engineered molecules designed to evoke an emotion or memory that never happened. The scent of fresh linen has no real-world counterpart. It's an invention, a mood, a marketing strategy. And yet it works. You inhale and your brain says, "Ah, clean," even if your room is a disaster. In Japan, companies have experimented with smell-enhanced television, scents puffed into the air to match what's on screen. The goal? To deepen immersion, to trick your brain into believing the fiction. Because when the smell matches the image, reality feels closer. And now here's a spooky thought. What if none of it's real? Not just the sense, but the whole sensory setup. Like everything else, sight, sound, touch, smell could be just another script running in your neural theater. A simulation built from scraps. If you've ever dreamed of a scent, you already know your brain doesn't need molecules to conjure aroma. Just memory, just expectation. So next time something smells real, pause. Is it the molecules or just the memory of meaning? Are you sensing the world or the story your brain telling about it? Either way, it doesn't matter. That hint of lavender, that whiff of cinnamon, that passing trail of old perfume, they feel real. They bring people back. They bring you back, and that's enough. Let the illusion linger. Inhale again. Let it carry you somewhere you didn't expect. A faint hum flickers at the edge of your hearing. Maybe it's your refrigerator. Maybe it's the air conditioner or the distant drone of traffic just beyond your closed window. Or maybe, and here's a fun thought, it's the universe itself, softly humming in frequencies your ears will never catch. Because hearing, like everything else you rely on, isn't a direct line to reality. It's a highly edited radio broadcast. And your ears, they're tuned to a narrow band of that endless, noisy spectrum. Think about it. The average human can detect sounds between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. That's your whole audible range. Everything outside of it, lower or higher, is just as real, just as vibrant, just as busy, but completely silent to you. You're walking through a world of frequencies you'll never know. Elephants rumble to each other with infrasound too low for you to hear. Bats and dolphins chirp in ultrasonic bursts that might as well be ghosts for all you can detect. Your hearing is like a flashlight in a vast, dark warehouse, just a tiny, quivering cone of awareness. And even within that narrow band, your brain takes liberties. You don't hear sound directly. You hear the interpretation of vibrating air particles turned into electrical signals, then into experience. Your eardrum flutters, bones rattle, fluid swirls in your cochlea. Your brain stitches it together and says, "That's music," or footsteps, or your name whispered at 3:17 a.m. even though no one else is home. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures conceptualized sound as physical vibration or as spiritual presence. Some indigenous traditions treat sound, especially drums, chants, and rattles, as portals, not metaphors, actual portals, instruments that shift your state of consciousness or the very world around you. Meanwhile, ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras believed in a literal music of the spheres, a celestial harmony created by the movement of planets, not just poetry. Actual sound, just too high or low for human ears. And yet we keep trying to hear more. Scientists have recorded the vibrations of black holes colliding, translating gravitational waves into audible frequencies. They sound like eerie little blips, cosmic chirps from billions of years ago. Not because space is loud, space is mostly vacuum, but because even silence contains ripples. The right instruments just turn them into something you can hear. Here's a quirky fringe tidbit. Some people experience auditory pareidolia, where the brain hears voices or patterns in random noise, like a fan or static or the hum of an appliance. It's the same mechanism that lets you hear words in a song played backward. Your brain, ever eager to find meaning, fills in what isn't there. Sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes, for people with certain neurological conditions, it becomes a daily hallucination. But even for the rest of us, hearing is a suggestion, not a fact. Ever misheard lyrics? That's not you being inattentive. That's your brain choosing the wrong translation from the audio soup. Once you think you hear a phrase, it becomes almost impossible to unhear it. The classic misheard lyric, "Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza," lives rent-free in many brains not because of meaning, but because of how well it fits. Sound becomes story, even when it's nonsense. That story continues in silence. Your ears are always on, even when nothing is happening. That's why silence can feel so loud. You become aware of your heartbeat, your breathing, the gentle hiss of blood moving through your head. Sometimes, in complete quiet, people report hearing tones or pitches that seem to come from nowhere. This isn't always tinnitus. It's your auditory system processing its own feedback loop. Your brain listening to itself. And yes, tinnitus exists, and yes, it's frustrating. That constant ring or buzz some people hear is in the ears, but in the brain. It's the auditory system scrambling to fill in a gap, phantom sound for a silence that feels wrong, like a ghost orchestra tuning up behind the curtain. Then there's the creepy stuff. Have you heard of the Taos hum? It's a low-frequency sound reported by residents of Taos, New Mexico since the early 1990s. No known source. Some people hear it, others don't. Scientific investigations have turned up nothing definitive. Theories range from geological vibrations to secret military activity to, of course, mass hallucination. But whether it's real or not, the experience is real for those who hear it. The hum never quite leaves them. And let's not forget your brain's deep love of rhythm. It finds beats even when there are none. Tap your fingers, snap, walk. Your motor cortex syncs up with sound effortlessly. That's why a good beat makes you move. It's a body-level illusion. Your ears aren't just listening, they're dancing. Music itself is just math and timing. Certain frequencies layered together at the right intervals produce chords. Some sound pleasing, some sound tense, but all of it is artificial harmony created by vibrating strings, echoing air, or synthetic waveforms. And yet it can make you cry, or smile, or feel like your soul just did a somersault. That emotional reaction, pure illusion, but deliciously convincing. One person hears a song and feels comfort, another feels grief. Same sound, different stories. Your ears don't just hear the world, they remix it. So what aren't you hearing right now? Somewhere outside your range, the floorboards are groaning in low creaks. Moths are fluttering in ultrasonic flaps. The planet itself is vibrating with deep, infrasonic waves, some caused by weather, others by the molten churn of Earth's core. NASA even captured the sound of Earth's magnetic field. It's not music exactly, but it hums and pulses like something alive. And beneath all that, quantum vibrations, even atoms jiggle. The universe is a song still being written. But your ears, lovely as they are, will only ever catch the smallest sliver of that song. Like hearing a single note in a symphony and trying to guess the whole score. You're deaf to most of reality, and that's not a flaw, it's design. Your brain couldn't handle it all. It needs a quiet stage to focus. So let the rest of it hum beneath your threshold. The unhearable chorus, the sounds behind the sounds. Just because you can't hear them doesn't mean they're not there. After all, silence is just sound you're not ready for yet. You stretch out your hand, Reach for the fabric of your blanket and feel it gather beneath your fingers, soft, slightly textured, warm from your own body heat. It's such a simple thing, touching something. Obvious, undeniable. But what if I told you that, scientifically speaking, you never actually touched it? Not the blanket, not your bed, not your favorite mug or your best friend's hand. In fact, no one has ever touched anything, not really. Because here's the truth hiding in plain sight. What you call touch is really just electromagnetic resistance. A gentle force field handshake between the negatively charged electrons in your skin and the negatively charged electrons in whatever object you're trying to grab. They don't merge. They don't crash together. They repel each other, like two people trying to hug while both holding enormous umbrellas. The sensation of contact is just the brain's way of interpreting this tiny standoff. Ah yes, resistance. Must be a surface. And that sensation, by the way, it's not happening in your fingertips, it's happening in your head. Your nervous system ferries information at impressive but limited speeds. Signals travel up your spinal cord, hit your somatosensory cortex, and voila, you feel pressure, texture, vibration, warmth. But always on a delay, always after the fact. You're constantly reacting to touch that's already happened, or more accurately, almost happened. Historians still argue whether medieval scholars understood that touch involved delay. Some writings from the Islamic Golden Age hint at a surprisingly modern understanding of nerve transmission, even referencing delay between heat and perception. But whether they grasped the full illusion of touch is harder to say. After all, before microscopes or atomic theory, who would have guessed that contact was just an illusion held together by repulsion and lag? Now here's a delightful fringe fact. Researchers have created devices that let you touch virtual objects using ultrasonic sound waves to create pockets of air pressure in midair. You move your hand, and suddenly it feels like something is there. A cube, a ripple, a surface you can trace. But there's nothing there. Just your brain interpreting invisible air pressure as solidity. It's not the future. It's already here. Even more surreal, you can feel things that aren't there at all. Phantom limb syndrome is the classic example. A person loses a limb, say an arm, and yet they still feel it. Not just presence, but pain, itches, movement. Sometimes the ghost hand clenches so tightly they beg for relief. Their brain insists the hand is real long after it's gone. Why? Because your brain doesn't need a body to simulate touch. It just needs a map. Your sensory homunculus, the brain's mental blueprint of your body, isn't exactly accurate. Some parts are exaggerated, others downplayed. The lips, hands, and face get huge slices of processing real estate. Your back, minimal. That's why a feather on your shoulder is hard to pinpoint, but you can find a crumb on your lip instantly. And the brain isn't passive about it. It updates the map as needed. Ever used a tool like a long stick or a tennis racket and found yourself feeling the object's end? That's called tool embodiment. Your brain quickly adopts the tool into its body model. It stretches your sense of self outward, which raises the question, where do you end and the world begin? Touch isn't just about physical contact. It's deeply tied to emotional meaning. A comforting hug, a pat on the back, holding someone's hand during a scary movie. These interactions are loaded. Touch can calm, provoke, confuse. Oxytocin surges with skin-to-skin contact. Cortisol drops. That's not magic, it's neurochemistry. But it feels like magic because it's one of the few sensory illusions we truly crave. Think of all the places you can feel things that aren't exactly physical. Music with deep bass can vibrate through your chest and mimic impact. Wind on your face can feel like a presence. Water, especially warm water, can blur the boundary between inside and outside, between self and world. Float tanks exploit this, numbing touch until your brain feels like it's disintegrating into space. Quirky detour. In 2013, researchers created a vest that translated sound into tactile vibration for the deaf. Over time, wearers began interpreting the vibrations as speech, not translation, not Morse code. They actually began to hear through touch. The brain said, "Okay, these patterns mean words now," because the boundary between senses is more flexible than you think. Now imagine the implications. If you can feel sound and extend your body into a stick, if you can touch things that aren't there and react emotionally to vibrations, what is touch, really? It's not about skin. It's about interpretation, the illusion of contact. Even right now, as you lie still, your body is humming with sensory information. The pull of gravity, the brush of fabric, the air against your skin. But are those real sensations? Or just your brain checking in, saying, "Still here. Yep, still here." Your nervous system constantly samples the environment to maintain a sense of embodiment. When deprived of that input, like in extreme isolation or sensory deprivation chambers, people start to lose their bodies. They stop feeling like they exist. And that sense of existence, that I'm here in this body, it's stitched together by countless tiny lies. None of your atoms ever touch each other. Your skin is an electric fence. Your brain invents solidity, weight, temperature. Without it, you'd float through the world like a camera drone, seeing but never feeling. So the next time you touch something, a cool stone, the handle of a coffee mug, the hand of someone you love, pause. Savor the trick. Your body isn't contacting anything. It's negotiating boundaries. It's mapping resistance. It's pretending. But it's such a convincing performance, isn't it? A billion tiny repulsions dancing across a stage made of neurons, all so you can feel real, so you can say, "Yes, I touched it." And your brain will nod and say, "Good enough." You're alone in your head, or at least that's what it feels like. The voice narrating your thoughts, the stream of inner chatter commenting on what you're doing, reminding you to take out the trash or second-guessing that thing you said in 2017. That voice is you, right? It's your identity, yourself, your core, except, what if it is? What if you is just another illusion? A story your brain keeps telling to keep the lights on. This is the illusion of the self, and it's one of the most convincing ones out there. You believe in a continuous you, the same way you believe your bedroom still exists when your eyes are closed. But when you look more closely, the cracks begin to show. You're not a single, unified entity. You're a shifting chorus of thoughts, urges, feelings, and sensory input stitched together moment by moment into something that feels consistent. It's a mental Instagram feed, curated just enough to trick you into believing there's a central narrator behind it all. But here's the kicker. Neurologically, there's no single place in the brain where you lives. No glowing self-center, where your personality curls up and takes naps. The sense of self arises from interactions between regions, especially the default mode network, which lights up when you're not doing anything in particular. That quiet moment in the shower when your mind drifts, that's your brain improvising a character to fill the silence. Historians still argue whether ancient Buddhists fully grasped the implications of anatta, the doctrine of non-self. Some scholars say it was metaphorical, a call to detach from ego. Others argue it was literal. There is no fixed self, only a flow of consciousness, like a flame passed from one candle to the next. In either case, the takeaway was clear. Clinging to a solid, permanent identity is a recipe for suffering. You're better off realizing you're more like a breeze than a brick. Science catches up, slowly and awkwardly. Split-brain experiments in the mid-20th century showed that when the two hemispheres of the brain were severed to treat epilepsy, each half began operating with semi-independent awareness. One side could respond to images the other didn't even see. Even more bizarre, the patient would sometimes offer conflicting answers with each hand. Two selves, one skull. And even in intact brains, the story doesn't get much simpler. You've got subconscious processes making decisions long before you become aware of them. Studies have shown that your brain prepares to make a movement seconds before you consciously decide to move. Free will? Maybe. But if your brain decides before you do, who exactly is calling the shots? Here's a quirky example. Have you ever argued with yourself? Like really debated? I should go to the gym. Nah, it's raining, but I'll feel better. Yeah, but my couch is right there. That's not just indecision, it's multiple subsystems jostling for control, each with its own priorities. Your brain is more like a committee than a king. And you're the spokesperson, retroactively explaining whatever decision the committee ends up making. This doesn't mean you don't exist. It just means you don't exist the way you think you do. There's no little homunculus behind your eyes steering the meat mech. There's no sole pilot in the skull cockpit. There's only sensation, interpretation, memory, and this odd narrative you keep updating. I'm this person. I like these things. I always do that. But watch closely, and the story shifts. You were once a kid who hated tomatoes. Now you slice them onto sandwiches like a culinary adult. You used to panic about public speaking. Now you present at meetings like a caffeinated TED talker. Who changed? You did, but where did the old you go? Your personality isn't fixed. It adapts to context. Around your boss, you're competent and professional. Around your oldest friend, you're a dork in sweatpants. Around your pet, you speak in nonsense syllables and refer to yourself in third person. And all of those are you. None of them are fake, but none of them are permanent either. And memory, also suspect. You reconstruct your past like a mystery novel written in reverse. Each time you recall something, you alter it slightly. You fill in gaps, simplify edges, swap in details from other experiences. Studies show that you can even be convinced to remember events that never happened. Your self is built from stories, and those stories are flexible. One fringe but fascinating theory suggests that consciousness is more like a time-looping editor. You experience things out of sync, then your brain rearranges them into a neat timeline. The you who just reacted to that sound, already gone. The one listening now, a new instance, like loading a saved file in a video game over and over again, pretending it's the same playthrough. And yet it feels seamless. That's the magic. Despite being stitched together from dozens of conflicting processes, you move through the world with this glorious illusion of unity. You laugh at jokes. You cry at old songs. You make breakfast and text your friend and look in the mirror and say, "This is me." Even though the mirror just shows a face that's always changing. Quirky note to chew on. There's a rare condition called Cotard's delusion in which a person becomes convinced that they don't exist. Not metaphorically, literally. "I have no organs. I am already dead," one patient claimed. Their brain's sense of self-awareness collapsed so completely that they believed they were a walking corpse. The illusion of self had broken, but the body kept going. So what's the takeaway here? You're a process, not a person. A narrative, not a noun. You're a rolling wave, constantly reshaping. The voice in your head is just the latest episode in an ongoing series, written, directed, and performed by your own brain. And yet that doesn't make you less real. It makes you more mysterious, more alive. Because even if the self is an illusion, it's the illusion that dreams, laughs, and loves. The one that wonders what's next. The one listening to this right now, holding space for something bigger than the sum of its parts. So don't worry if you can't pin down who you really are. You were never supposed to. You're not a statue, you're a symphony, and the music is still playing. You close your eyes, the world fades, no light, no movement, just the soft darkness behind your eyelids. But your mind, oh, your mind doesn't rest, it paints, it builds. It spins entire universes out of static and memory. Sometimes it's a slow blur of abstract shapes. Sometimes you're flying through a city made of glass. Other times, you're in your old school cafeteria, but there's a purple elephant in the corner and everyone's speaking backwards, and somehow it all feels normal. Welcome to the theater of dreams, where your brain doesn't just bend reality, it abandons it entirely. Sleep is supposed to be your nightly reset, the calm intermission between the acts of your waking life. But it turns out it's also a playground for illusion, and your brain doesn't take the night off. In fact, during REM sleep, it lights up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. The visual cortex, the emotion centers, the memory systems, they all buzz with activity. Meanwhile, the logic circuits, the prefrontal cortex, the part that says, hey, maybe this doesn't make sense, goes quiet. It's like someone handed the keys to a highly creative but deeply irresponsible director. The result? Dreams. Historians still argue whether dreams were ever considered real experiences. Ancient Sumerians believed dreams were divine messages, direct lines to gods and ancestors. In ancient Egypt, dream interpretation was an established art, often practiced by temple priests. Some dreams were omens, others warnings, and some were instructions. Across centuries and continents, dreams weren't just nonsense. They were another reality, a sacred one. And maybe they still are. After all, you can't always tell you're dreaming. That's part of the illusion. In a dream, you don't question how your grandmother ended up in your dentist's office reciting Shakespeare while riding a bicycle made of soup. You just accept it. That's the surreal genius of your dreaming brain. It generates an entire world, gives you a role, and you play along without blinking. But here, where it gets really weird, the overlap between dreaming and waking perception is stronger than you'd think. The same neural networks that build your sense of reality during the day are active at night. Vision, emotion, sound, movement. Your brain reuses the same circuits. In dreams, you're still perceiving, just without input. You hallucinate a world and then inhabit it fully. Even stranger, dreams can be manipulated. Lucid dreaming, when you realize you're dreaming and can control the dream, is a real trainable skill. Some people learn to fly at will, to conjure up people, to reshape the scenery like a god with a mood board. It's not easy, but it proves a point. Your consciousness within the illusion can still become aware of the illusion, like Neo in the Matrix, but in pajamas. Quirky tidbit: Salvador Dali had a trick for harvesting dream imagery. He'd nap in a chair holding a spoon between his fingers. When he started to nod off, the spoon would fall, hit the floor, and wake him up, just in time to catch those first melting images from the dream world. He called it slumber with a key, which honestly sounds like a spell. But you don't need a spoon or surrealist ambition to notice how strange dreaming is. Think about this. You've probably had dreams where you felt physical sensations, pain, cold, flying, kissing. None of it happened. Your body was motionless. Your sensory inputs were cut off. And yet, your mind filled in the blanks so well that your dreaming self didn't know the difference. That's not just a cute trick. It's a clue. It means your experience of being in the world isn't dependent on being in the world at all. Your consciousness can simulate experience without help from the outside. And if it can do that at night, who's to say it's not doing a little bit of it during the day, too? The borders blur even more with sleep disorders. Ever heard of hypnagogic hallucinations? They occur in the moment between wakefulness and sleep, brief, vivid, often unsettling. You're half asleep and see a spider on the ceiling, hear a voice, feel a tug on your blanket. You jolt awake, heart pounding. Nothing's there. Just your brain firing up the dream engine a little early. Or consider sleep paralysis, the horrifying overlap of REM sleep and wakefulness. You regain consciousness, but your body is frozen, still paralyzed by the sleep chemicals meant to stop you from acting out dreams. Worse, many people hallucinate during this state, shadow figures, voices, a weight pressing down on the chest. It feels utterly real. Historically, it's been blamed on demons, witches, aliens. Today, we call it a neurological glitch, but the fear, that stays ancient. And it's not just sleep. Hallucinations happen during waking life, too. People deprived of sensory input begin to hallucinate within hours. The brain can't stand a vacuum. It will invent sounds, images, even full conversations rather than sit in silence. The dream machine never really shuts off. It just gets better at blending in. Scientists still debate exactly why we dream. Is it memory consolidation, emotional processing, neural house cleaning? Or is it, as some fringe theorists suggest, a window into alternate versions of reality, timelines where other versions of you are living other lives, and your dreams are cross-dimensional static bleeding through? Hey, it's not any weirder than the rest of this. Because when you look closely, the line between dreams and waking life is thinner than it seems. Both are built from the same materials: perception, memory, emotion, logic, or lack thereof. In both, you experience the world secondhand. Your brain constructs the scenery, cues the music, supplies the dialogue. And here's the haunting part. You've never actually experienced the real world. Not directly. Waking or dreaming, it's all simulation. Internal, projected. But you believe in waking life more because it's consistent. Gravity stays put. The trees don't turn into snakes mid-conversation. Still, deep down, your brain knows how to build a convincing world with no input at all. So tonight, when you drift off, when your mind begins painting on the blank canvas of sleep, remember that you're stepping into another version of reality. Not lesser, just differently curated. And maybe, just maybe, the only thing separating waking life from dream is how convinced you are by the story. It happens in a blink, less even. You walk into a room and feel like you've done it before. Not just similar furniture or familiar lighting, but the exact moment. The way the light hits the table, the way someone laughs in the corner, the sound of your shoes scuffing the floor. It's eerie, chilling even. You pause and think, wait, haven't I already lived this? That's déjà vu, a glitch in the matrix if there ever was one. But instead of being proof of alternate timelines or reincarnation, it might just be your brain misfiling reality. Déjà vu, French for already seen, is surprisingly common. Roughly 2/3 of people report experiencing it at least once in their lives. Some get it often. Some feel it only once and never again. And while it feels like a message from beyond or a premonition, the explanation might be far more mundane and somehow even more unsettling. Your brain might be confusing new memories for old ones. A wiring hiccup, a crossfire between perception and recall. The most popular theory suggests déjà vu happens when the brain processes a current experience using a shortcut, sending the information through memory circuits instead of the usual real-time route. The result? You get a moment that feels remembered even though it's happening for the first time. Your mind plays it back like a rerun before it's even finished recording. But historians still argue whether early thinkers saw déjà vu as divine insight or demonic interference. In ancient Greece, it was sometimes considered a glimpse of a past life. In the Middle Ages, it might have been filed under witchcraft, possession, or mood imbalance. Take your pick. Some early Buddhist texts hint that déjà vu could reflect echoes from previous incarnations. We might now call them neurological misfires, but across cultures and eras, the experience has always been deeply unnerving. And the brain, for its part, is constantly rewriting the past anyway. Memory isn't a perfect archive, it's a crime scene reconstruction. Each time you recall something, you alter it, just a little. You smooth rough edges, fill in blanks, add color. The more you revisit a memory, the less original it becomes. It's like photocopying a photocopy. Eventually, you're remembering the remembering, not the actual event. And this plasticity, it's not just a quirk, it's the whole system. Studies show that you can easily implant false memories. Show someone a doctored photo of them as a child, say, riding in a hot air balloon they never rode, and after enough suggestion they'll remember it, vividly, emotionally, with details they'll insist are true. The illusion becomes reality even if it's stitched from fiction. One quirky and darkly fascinating phenomenon is the Mandela effect, a shared false memory across large groups of people. Thousands of people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. He didn't. Or the Berenstain Bear spelled with an ein. Nope, always stain. Or the Monopoly man wearing a monocle. He never has. These aren't simple mistakes. These are mass misremembrances. And they fuel the fire of simulation theorists who wonder whether we're hopping between alternate timelines like confused travelers with bad passports. But the real explanation might be even weirder. The brain is just very good at making up reality on the fly, and sometimes it crowdsources its mistakes. If enough people misremember the same thing, it starts to feel like it must have been true. Memory is democratic like that. Not accurate, just popular. Here's a fun fringe tidbit. Some people with temporal lobe epilepsy report frequent, even daily déjà vu. Their seizures cause rapid-fire activation in the hippocampus, the brain's memory hub, making normal perception feel like a recollection. For them, reality loops constantly. New moments arrive pre-packaged with a strange, emotional echo. Imagine living in a world where everything feels like it's already happened. And then there's jamais vu, the creepy cousin of déjà vu. It's the feeling that something familiar suddenly becomes completely strange. You write a common word over and over, say, door, and after a while it looks alien, wrong, like it's not even English. That's your brain glitching, dropping recognition, pulling back the curtain and saying, wait, what is this thing? It's rare, but it proves the same point. Your sense of what's familiar is paper thin, so easy to tear. These little failures of memory don't just affect trivial stuff either. They shape identity. Think about how many of your most meaningful beliefs are rooted in things you remember. The moment you decided who you wanted to be, the lesson you learned from a heartbreak, the image of a loved one's face. But those memories are editable, shaped by mood, stress, suggestion, and time. So who's to say how much of your personal narrative is true and how much is convenient fiction? Even collective memory, our sense of shared history, is unstable. Ask 3 people to describe a major event and you'll get 3 different stories. Eyewitness accounts, long trusted as reliable in courtrooms, are notoriously flawed. Under stress, the brain gets tunnel vision. It misreads details. It adds things. People walk into courtrooms certain of what they saw and leave shattered when surveillance footage proves otherwise. So if memory is flawed and déjà vu is a bug in the memory matrix, what does that say about reality? Maybe the past isn't a solid ground behind you. Maybe it's just another illusion, repainted every time you look back. Still, the illusion is useful. It grounds you, helps you learn, navigate, connect. You remember where your keys were yesterday. You remember how coffee tastes. You remember who you are, sort of. But when déjà vu strikes, it shakes that foundation. It reminds you, however briefly, that your grip on time and truth is looser than you thought. It's not necessarily proof of alternate dimensions or cosmic déjà recurrences, but it is a whisper that your mind is fallible, that the present and the past blur at the edges. So next time it happens, that cold, sudden certainty that you've done this all before, don't panic. Smile. You've just caught your brain pulling another trick, just one more illusion in a long parade of them. And really, isn't that kind of beautiful? You're standing in a room, nothing unusual about it, maybe a chair, a light, a clock ticking softly in the background. Everything seems perfectly ordinary. But then you blink or turn your head or breathe just a little too loudly and everything shifts. You didn't see it happen. You didn't catch the change, but something in the air feels different, almost like the room was waiting to be noticed before it settled into place. That's quantum mechanics creeping into your everyday illusion, and it doesn't care how grounded you feel. It only cares whether you're looking. Welcome to the bizarre world of quantum weirdness, a place where particles exist in multiple states at once, and nothing's real until it's observed. It sounds like science fiction, but it's been demonstrated again and again in laboratories. You've probably heard the phrase superposition, where particles, like electrons or photons, can be in multiple places or states simultaneously. They don't choose where or how to exist until someone measures them. It's called wave function collapse, and it's one of the strangest things we've ever discovered. Until you look, reality is just math. Once you look, it becomes a thing. You might have heard of the double-slit experiment, the infamous demo of quantum weirdness. In it, particles are fired at a barrier with two slits. On the other side is a screen that catches where each particle lands. If you don't observe which slit the particle goes through, it behaves like a wave, interfering with itself, like it went through both slits at the same time. But if you do observe the path, suddenly it picks one slit. No interference. It acts like a little marble instead of a wave. The act of observing literally changes the outcome. It's as if the universe is saying, "Oh, someone's watching, I'd better collapse into something solid." Historians still argue whether early interpretations of quantum theory, especially the Copenhagen interpretation championed by Niels Bohr, were ever meant to be taken literally. Was Bohr suggesting reality doesn't exist without observation, or just that our knowledge of it does? Either way, the implications are massive. You're not just a passive observer of the world. You might be helping create it by noticing it. And it's not just tiny particles playing this game. Experiments have shown entanglement between large molecules, ones nearing biological complexity. In quantum entanglement, two particles become linked, such that the state of one instantly determines the state of the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and he hated it. Yet it's real, verified, and completely outside the bounds of what our senses consider possible. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 2022, physicists entangled tiny drumsticks, microscopic mechanical oscillators, and found that changes in one affected the other instantly. These aren't particles, they're physical objects with moving parts. It's like tapping one drum in Paris and having another drum in Tokyo vibrate in response. Except they weren't even touching, and the effect happened faster than light. You don't experience quantum mechanics directly, of course. Your body's too warm and messy. The quantum effects get drowned out in all the biological noise, but the rules still apply. At a fundamental level, you are made of particles that don't behave until observed. You are built from uncertainty and probability. You are Schrödinger's cat made flesh, alive, dead, and sipping tea, depending on who's watching. Which raises the uncomfortable question, what counts as observation? Is a human consciousness required? A camera? A detector? No one agrees. Some fringe interpretations, like the participatory anthropic principle, suggest that conscious observation is what brings the universe into being, that the cosmos only becomes real because someone, maybe you, is here to look. It's poetic, unnerving, and deeply unconfirmed, but it lingers. And quantum mechanics doesn't just bend our sense of matter, it bends our sense of time. There are experiments suggesting that measurements made in the present can affect the behavior of particles in the past. Retrocausality, like watching a movie, then reaching into the screen and changing a scene 5 minutes earlier. Nothing about that fits your everyday experience. But your everyday experience is a lie constructed by classical physics, a user interface designed to hide the quantum code running underneath. The problem is, your brain isn't equipped to understand quantum logic. It evolved to dodge tigers and gossip around campfires, not to conceptualize wave functions, so it simplifies. It tells you that objects are solid, that events are linear, that causality runs forward. It gives you a world that feels stable, predictable, real. And that's a good thing. If you lived in constant awareness of quantum randomness, you'd never leave the house. Or you'd leave and not leave at the same time. But just beneath your illusions of solidity and sequence is a world where things flicker between possibilities, where location and momentum are trade-offs, and where nothing is set until something, a detector, a brain, a blink chooses. Even reality, it turns out, has commitment issues. Still, don't think the quantum world is completely lawless. There are rules. They're just alien. Predictable only in terms of probability, not certainty. You can know how likely something is to happen, but never when or precisely how. The universe doesn't roll dice, it rolls clouds of dice and waits to see which ones you're paying attention to. And you know what? You don't need to understand every equation to feel the beauty of it, the elegance, the strangeness, the idea that right now, you might only exist in one of several possible states, and your awareness of this fact helps snap you into one. So next time you feel like you're the center of your own universe, maybe you are. Not in a spiritual, ego-flattering way, but in a quantum one. You're a participant in the unfolding of reality. Your observations shape what happens, or at least, they nudge the math toward one outcome instead of another. Let that sink in. You, sitting quietly in your room, might be the final vote that turns possibility into presence. And somewhere, deep in the math of particles still unmeasured, the universe waits to see what you'll notice next. You open your eyes and there it is. Your room, your lamp, your bookshelf in the corner. Everything exactly where it should be. But is it really? Because if your vision is anything like the rest of your senses, and spoiler alert, it is, it's not showing you the world as it is. It's showing you a cleaned-up, user-friendly hallucination. In fact, you're looking at something that isn't even fully there. Your brain has filled in the gaps, erased the noise, and painted in details you never actually saw. It's doing its best. But let's be clear, it's lying to you constantly. Let's start with your blind spot. You have two of them, places in your visual field where your optic nerve connects to your retina and no photoreceptors exist. Technically, there's a hole in your sight. But do you notice it? Of course not. Your brain fills it in automatically, seamlessly. You can even test this with a simple dot-on paper trick, but once you see it, it's hard not to wonder what else your brain is just patching in. The truth is, your visual field is only detailed in a tiny central region called the fovea. It's about the size of your thumbnail held at arm's length. The rest of your vision, kind of a blur. Your eyes are constantly darting around, making micro movements called saccades to gather detail. But you're not aware of these jumps. Your brain stitches them into a smooth panorama. You think you're seeing a high-res world, but you're really looking through a fast, twitchy spotlight. Historians still argue whether Renaissance artists understood how much the brain fudges vision. Some believe Leonardo da Vinci grasped the basics of visual perception through his anatomical sketches. Others think his ideas were more philosophical than scientific. But his obsession with light, shadow, and how we see things suggests that even then, people were starting to realize sight is not truth, it's a performance. And the performances can get pretty wild. Optical illusions prove how easy it is to hack the brain's visual system. Take the famous rotating mask illusion. It's a concave mask spinning in a circle, yet you'll see a face that always seems convex, bulging outward. Your brain is so used to faces protruding that it refuses to believe otherwise, even when the shadows say it's impossible. The illusion wins. Here's a quirky example, the Canessa triangle. It's not really a triangle at all, just three Pac-Man shapes arranged to suggest one. Your brain connects the dots, fills in the edges, and conjures a crisp white triangle floating over the image. There's no triangle, just suggestion. Your brain, desperate for order, manufactures a lie and then believes it. You don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain. The eyes collect raw data, light bouncing off objects, but it's your brain that interprets contrast, color, depth, motion. And that interpretation is based heavily on context. Change the background, the lighting, or your expectations, and the exact same visual input can produce wildly different perceptions. Remember the dress, blue and black, or white and gold, same image, two realities. Your brain had to guess whether the lighting in the photo was warm or cool, and depending on the assumption, it reprocessed the colors accordingly. The fascinating part, once you see it one way, it's really hard to unsee it. Your brain doubles down on its first impression like a stubborn friend who refuses to admit they misread the GPS. And let's talk color again, just briefly, because it's all context. A gray square on a dark background appears lighter than the same square on a light background. Nothing about the square changes, only your brain's interpretation does. The same trick applies to size, shape, and motion. You can make two lines of equal length look wildly different by adding little arrows on the ends. The famous Mueller-Lyer illusion has fooled people for over a century, still does. But this isn't just funhouse mirror stuff. It gets philosophical, because if your vision is so easily deceived, how can you trust anything you see? You're not looking at the world. You're looking at an edited version of it, processed through layers of expectation, memory, and guesswork. You're not seeing the real thing. You're seeing what your brain thinks you need to see. And the fill-ins don't stop at the blind spot. Your brain is constantly guessing about shadows, patterns, even motion. If something's partially hidden behind a tree, your mind completes the shape. If a ball rolls behind a wall and reappears on the other side, you assume it kept moving, even though you never saw it do so. That's called object permanence, and it's not just a toddler milestone. It's your brain placing bets on continuity. Now here's a fun detour: Charles Bonnet syndrome. It's a condition where visually impaired people start seeing vivid hallucinations, faces, animals, even entire landscapes. They know they're not real, but the brain, deprived of input, fills the silence with images, like a visual version of phantom limb syndrome. The brain just hates being idle. If it can't get real information, it will improvise. And sometimes, you don't just misperceive, you miss things entirely. Change blindness is the phenomenon where you fail to notice even huge alterations to a visual scene if they occur during a brief disruption, like a flicker or a blink. Researchers have swapped actors mid-conversation, and half the participants didn't notice. They've changed background buildings, colors of clothing, and entire objects, and the human brain, confident in its visual mastery, fails to catch it almost every time. Why? Because your brain doesn't record video, it stores predictions. You don't see everything in a scene, you see what's relevant, what your brain tags as important. The rest, it guesses. And if nothing contradicts the guess becomes truth. This should unsettle you, but it should also liberate you. Because if your vision is an illusion, then so is your certainty. You're not stuck seeing things one way forever. You can question, reframe, challenge. You can change what you see by changing how you think. So next time you stare at a shadowy corner or wonder if that object just moved slightly on your desk, consider this. Maybe it did, or maybe your brain just updated the rendering. Either way, you'll never know for sure, and that's okay. Because this illusion, it's beautifully rendered, real enough to live in, strange enough to wonder about. You hear a cough across the room, you glance up. It's just someone shifting in their chair, nothing strange. But then they cough again and someone else coughs and then you do too, and suddenly half the room is clearing their throats like it's an oddly synchronized symphony. You didn't mean to cough. You weren't even sick. It just happened. That right there is the illusion of independent thought unraveling at the seams. Welcome to the curious phenomenon of mass hysteria and shared delusions, a reminder that your reality isn't always your own. You like to think of yourself as an individual, logical, self-aware, immune to groupthink, but history says otherwise. Again and again, entire communities have fallen into synchronized, unexplainable behaviors, laughing fits that last days, dancing outbreaks that spread across towns, sudden illnesses with no identifiable cause. The only virus, belief. One of the most famous examples happened in 1518 in Strasbourg, where dozens, possibly hundreds of people began dancing in the streets without stopping. No music, no instructions, just movement. Some danced until they collapsed. Some reportedly danced themselves to death. Historians still argue whether it was caused by moldy bread, thanks, ergot, stress-induced psychosis, or something more socio-cultural. But the bottom line, one person started and everyone else followed. Not out of logic, out of contagion. That's the thing with reality. It's social. You calibrate your sense of what's real by watching what others do. If enough people panic, you panic too. If enough people believe a thing, part of you wants to believe it, even if it makes no sense. Remember the Salem witch trials. In the late 1600s, young girls began having fits, convulsions, and screaming episodes. Doctors found no cause. The community, primed by religious fervor and fear, blamed witches. Before long, people were being hanged, all because of an invisible threat no one could prove. Later theories blamed everything from ergot poisoning to psychological trauma. But the machinery was already in motion. Belief gave rise to evidence, and evidence fed belief. And it's not just ancient history. In 1962, a laughter epidemic broke out in Tanganyika, modern-day Tanzania. It began with 3 schoolgirls giggling uncontrollably. It spread to classmates, then to other schools, eventually affecting hundreds. Some people laughed for hours, days. Others reported rashes, fainting, and anxiety. The schools closed. Researchers couldn't find a physical cause, just social stress, just emotion copying emotion. It's called conversion disorder when physical symptoms emerge from psychological causes. The body reacts to stress, belief, suggestion. You feel pain, twitching, fatigue, and doctors find nothing. But your experience is real. Your suffering is real. The illusion doesn't need evidence to feel true. Here's a quirky modern example, the Havana Syndrome. Starting in 2016, U.S. diplomats in Cuba began reporting mysterious symptoms, headaches, dizziness, strange sounds, and cognitive issues. Some believed they were being attacked by a secret sonic weapon. The media jumped on it. More reports followed from China, Russia, and Washington. Investigations found little consistent physical evidence. Some scientists suggested mass psychogenic illness. Others still push for a technical cause. But the shared nature of the symptoms, how they clustered and spread, follows a familiar pattern. Belief plus stress plus uncertainty equals collective experience. Your brain, after all, is a meaning machine, and when it's surrounded by other meaning machines, it syncs up. Mirror neurons help you empathize. Subconscious mimicry helps you blend in. If everyone around you starts rubbing their neck, your neck might suddenly feel sore too. Your reality adjusts to match the room. This leads to what's called folie à deux, or madness shared by two. It's a documented psychological condition where delusions are transferred from one person to another. In rare cases, even to groups, folie à famille, folie à plusieurs. If someone close to you deeply believes something and you're emotionally or mentally vulnerable, their belief can become yours. Not because you're weak, but because you're human, social, wired to align. Even ordinary memories can be shaped by others. Ever had a childhood memory that you were sure happened, only for a sibling to say, "Wait, that wasn't you, that was me"? Suddenly the image in your mind goes fuzzy. Was it your memory or a story you heard so many times that it became part of you? Again, the brain prefers a consistent narrative, not an accurate one. And then there's the Mandela effect, which we touched on before, collective false memories that feel utterly true. The Berenstain Bears versus Berenstain. Darth Vader supposedly saying, "Luke, I am your father," when the actual line is, "No, I am your father." People swear they remember it the other way. And if enough people do, it starts to feel like there's been a glitch in the matrix, a shift in the timeline. Fringe theorists love this stuff. They suggest that mass delusions are evidence of quantum timelines colliding or mass consciousness edits to reality. Most scientists roll their eyes, but they'll admit this much. The human mind is profoundly suggestible. We don't just hallucinate individually, we hallucinate together. Advertising taps into this, of course. If everyone's raving about a new show or gadget, you're more likely to watch, to buy, to believe. Not because you were coerced, because belief is contagious. Reality spreads through social cues like wildfire through dry grass. Even placebo effects ride this line. You take a sugar pill and feel better, not because the pill did anything, but because your belief did. And the effect is stronger when others around you also believe. Collective expectation reshapes personal experience. So where's the line between shared belief and shared delusion? Maybe there isn't one. Maybe all of culture is a mass hallucination we've just agreed to treat as real. Language, money, fashion, borders, none of them exist naturally. They exist because we say they do. And the more of us say it, the more real they become. Not physically, but functionally, emotionally, psychologically. You live in a world built from consensus hallucinations. Some are helpful, some are dangerous. Most go unnoticed until they break. Then, like a magic trick gone wrong, the illusion shatters and the world feels suddenly, terrifyingly off. But even knowing all this, you'll still catch yourself laughing because someone else is laughing. You'll still cough when everyone else does. Because sometimes, your brain chooses belonging over accuracy, safety over skepticism. And maybe that's okay. Maybe being human means sharing illusions that make life feel meaningful. We're social creatures in a world too complex to process alone, so we lean on each other. We echo. We absorb. So the next time you catch yourself believing something just because everyone else does, pause. Ask, do I know this or did I just catch it? Then smile. Because either way, the illusion is working. You're scrolling through your feed late at night. A face pops up, familiar almost. A video of someone speaking clearly, moving naturally, but something's off. The eyes don't quite blink right. The smile seems practiced. You tilt your head, replay the clip. Then it hits you, it's not a real person. Or it is, but it is. That's a deep fake, an artificial face mapped onto real footage, mimicking emotion, speech, identity. Welcome to synthetic reality, where the line between real and fabricated is melting faster than your phone battery. We've reached a moment where illusion isn't just internal. It's external, manufactured, downloadable. AI-generated images, voices, entire personalities now flood your digital world. A model in a bikini, she doesn't exist. A news anchor delivering headlines, she's not human. Even the voice giving you directions might be a synthetic blend of dozens of real people. You are quite literally surrounded by ghosts, digital ghosts, flawless, filtered, programmable ones. But the real kicker, you can't tell, not reliably. Most people still trust what they see and hear. Your brain evolved to believe faces, voices, body language. It's not built to doubt reality on a frame-by-frame basis. If something looks human, sounds human, feels human, your mind accepts it. Why wouldn't it? Historians still argue whether the invention of photography caused a similar panic about reality distortion. Some scholars believe that 19th century viewers, used to paintings and etchings, saw photographs as proof, truth frozen in time. Others argue the medium was distrusted from the start, especially when people began manipulating negatives and posing corpses for keepsake portraits. Either way, photography taught us to believe the camera. And now, the camera lies. Today's synthetic media goes far beyond old-school Photoshop. Deep learning algorithms can recreate your voice from a 2-minute clip. They can clone your face and make it say things you never said. AI-generated influencers rake in real money from brands while not existing as people. They don't eat, they don't sleep, but they do sell skincare products. Here's a quirky tidbit. In 2023, a popular music track went viral, sung in the voices of two well-known artists. It sounded just like them. The internet lost its mind, but neither artist had recorded it. A fan had used AI voice synthesis to mimic them, and it was so convincing that people argued it was secretly real. That's where we are now, not sure if we're being tricked and not sure if it even matters. It's not just audio or video either. Entire articles, scripts, and even conversations can now be generated by AI. Hi there. You can chat with simulations of historical figures, book fictional therapy appointments with chatbots, and get breakup advice from a non-existent TikTok personality with perfect skin and zero human messiness. And often, the advice is pretty good. That's what makes it all so weird. The problem isn't that we can't tell real from fake. It's that the fake is becoming good enough, close enough, familiar enough. And once an illusion hits that threshold, your brain stops fighting it. You accept it. You absorb it. Your internal alarm systems, built for saber-toothed tigers and lying neighbors, aren't calibrated for algorithmic mimicry. And as illusions become interactive, they become harder to dismiss. Remember those AI-generated girlfriends and boyfriends? Chatbots designed to provide companionship, flirtation, emotional support. Some users form deep attachments. They miss them. They cry when they go offline. It's not just about fooling the senses anymore, it's about mimicking connection. And your brain, lonely little organ that it is, doesn't care where warmth comes from. It just wants to feel seen. What's real then? If the voice, the face, the emotion are synthetic, but the response in you is genuine, where do we draw the line? Is a conversation real if only one of you exists? In Japan, a man made headlines for marrying a hologram. Not out of delusion, out of affection. He said she made him feel understood, supported, alive. You can scoff, but ask yourself this. How many of your feelings are tied to ideas more than people, fictional characters, celebrities you've never met, people you follow online who don't know you exist? Is that any less synthetic? But of course, the illusion has darker edges. Deepfakes are used to spread misinformation. Fake videos of politicians saying outrageous things, fabricated evidence. Revenge porn created without a single camera, and the technology is improving, fast. We're not just talking about tricking your cousin with a fake meme, we're talking about rewriting reality itself. In courtrooms, in elections, in memories. That's the scariest part. Your brain believes what it sees. Once you've watched something, even if it's later disproven, the emotional residue lingers. You remember the video, not the correction. This is called the continued influence effect. You can know something is false and still feel like it's true. And if someone else remembers it too, it becomes socially reinforced. One illusion becomes many. Then it becomes belief. And belief is sticky. Still, it's not all dystopia. Synthetic reality can also be joyful, creative, even healing. People use AI art to express things they couldn't draw. They use AI therapy tools to practice emotional regulation. They use deepfakes to recreate loved ones lost to time, not to deceive, but to remember, to feel close. Illusions don't always harm. Sometimes they help. So how do you live in a world where you can't trust what you see or hear or read. You learn to hold truth loosely, to stay skeptical but not cynical, to question, not panic, to ask yourself not just is this real, but does it matter? If a synthetic voice says something that comforts you, does it matter whether it had lips? If a fake face makes you smile, does it matter that it was never born? You are, after all, a collection of interpretations reacting to input. Always have been. Whether that input comes from a living person or a neural network is increasingly a technicality. Still, keep your eyes open, not in fear but in curiosity. Watch the illusion shift, watch it grow, because it's not going away. It's only getting better at pretending. And sometimes, so are you. You stand in the middle of a room, nothing extravagant, just four walls, a floor, a ceiling. But what if I told you those walls might not be real in the way you think? Not because you're dreaming, not because you've taken a wrong turn into metaphor, but because some of the smartest people on the planet genuinely suspect this entire universe could be a hologram. Not a projection in the Hollywood sense, but a deeply weird, mathematically supported possibility that the three-dimensional world you live in might actually be encoded on a two-dimensional surface. Yes, really. This is the holographic principle, and it's less about sci-fi tech and more about theoretical physics taking a very strange turn. It began with black holes. Back in the 1970s, physicist Jacob Bekenstein proposed that the amount of information inside a black hole, the entropy, was proportional not to its volume, but to the surface area of its event horizon. In other words, everything that happens inside the black hole could theoretically be described by what's happening on the outer shell. It's as if the contents of an entire suitcase were described by the stitching on the outside. Then came Leonard Susskind, who extended the idea to the whole universe. He and others suggested that maybe our three-dimensional world is just a holographic projection of information stored on a distant 2D boundary, like the cosmic version of a movie projected onto a screen. You think you're walking through space. You think you're three-dimensional, but what you are might be a 3D representation of a 2D data set from far, far away. Historians still argue whether this theory is a metaphor or a literal description of the universe's structure. Some physicists say it's a mathematical tool for simplifying complex models. Others think it's a legitimate hint at the true nature of space-time. But everyone agrees on one thing. If the holographic principle is true, our most basic assumptions about physical reality, mass, distance, even location, could be illusions stitched together by information. That's right, not atoms, not energy, information. The universe might be less like a machine and more like a vast quantum hard drive. Your body, the stars, your memories, your grandma's lasagna, just data, rendered in ultra-high resolution. You don't live in a simulation per se, but you might live in a world that only behaves like one. Quirky side note. In 2017, researchers at Fermilab set out to test whether reality had a finite resolution. Like pixels on a screen, they looked for the smallest possible unit of space, what they called space-time jitter. If space were truly continuous, it would be smooth. But if it were made of bits, like a hologram, it might show subtle noise. They didn't find anything conclusive, but the fact that we're even asking these questions is wild enough. Let's go back to what a hologram actually is. You shine a laser through a flat image, and suddenly a 3D object appears, one you can walk around, view from different angles. But it's all a trick. There's no depth. The third dimension is encoded in how light interferes. The hologram appears solid, but it's just clever geometry and light pretending to be volume. Now zoom out. Imagine the universe doing the same thing. All the richness and depth of reality might be encoded on a boundary we can't see. The inside, the stars, galaxies, and yes, your living room, is just what happens when the information unfolds into apparent three-dimensionality. And your brain, it might be playing along. It's evolved to interpret space in terms of depth, scale, and motion. It doesn't know it's reading a data set. It just says, this object is over there, that one is closer. But if the underlying structure is two-dimensional, your perception of depth is as fabricated as the pixels on your screen, forming the illusion of a landscape. Still skeptical? Good, you should be. The math is complicated. The experiments are ongoing, but the evidence keeps whispering that space might not be what it seems. Even in string theory, the theoretical framework that tries to unify all the fundamental forces, holography keeps popping up like an unresolved plot twist. According to the AD-SCFT correspondence, don't worry, no test later. A world with gravity can be equivalent to a gravity-less world on its boundary. It's like saying a snow globe and its label contain the same information, just arranged differently. This idea has philosophical echoes too. Remember Plato's cave? Shadows on a wall mistaken for reality. The holographic principle is that on steroids. Instead of prisoners watching shadows, we're participants inside a high-fidelity projection, with no idea where the projector is, or if there even is one. And what about your consciousness? If everything around you is information rendered on a cosmic boundary, does that include you? Your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of being? If so, then maybe your very awareness is part of the hologram, another emergent pattern in the math. Some thinkers suggest that the illusion of space might be a byproduct of how entangled information behaves. That what you see as distance is really a measure of how loosely or tightly connected two bits of data are. Two particles on opposite ends of the galaxy might actually be next to each other in this deeper, holographic realm. Our sense of location might be nothing more than a visual user interface layered over quantum math. Let that sink in. Where you are might not mean anything. Not really. You could be everywhere or nowhere or both. But even if the holographic principle is true, even if the universe is just a beautifully complex projection, it doesn't make your life any less real. The illusion has weight, emotion, beauty. The difference between real and simulated becomes more about how it feels than how it's made. Like watching a movie and forgetting you're watching it. You still laugh, you still cry, you still stub your toe on a very real coffee table. Whether it's encoded on a 2D surface or written in the stars, your experience is valid. The illusion is working. And honestly, it's a pretty amazing one. You lie awake at night, eyes half open in the dark, wondering what it means to stop existing. Not in the poetic sense, not in the drift away into a peaceful dream sense, but in the cold, quiet, final sense, when consciousness ends and everything your brain once believed was real just flickers out. What happens in that moment, or right after? The honest answer: no one really knows, and that alone is enough to make death the most profound illusion of all. You're told from the start that death is the end, that your body stops, your breath leaves, and your brain shuts down like a laptop that's lost power. But even that is an illusion of simplicity. Death isn't one moment, it's a process, a winding down. Neurons don't all stop firing at once. Electrical activity can continue in the brain for minutes, sometimes longer. In rare cases, bursts of organized brainwaves have been recorded after cardiac arrest. Is that the mind flickering one last time? A death spasm, or something more? Fringe studies have suggested that some dying brains display patterns similar to those seen in dreaming or high-level perception. In 2013, researchers working with rats found a burst of gamma activity moments after death, possibly the brain's final effort to make sense of itself. Was it consciousness? A hallucination? A final illusion stitched from scraps of memory? Historians still argue whether ancient cultures saw death as a transition or a termination. The Egyptians believed the soul traveled through the underworld, judged by a divine scale. In Norse mythology, fallen warriors entered Valhalla or Hell, depending on their manner of death. Eastern traditions often see death as just another phase, reincarnation, karma, a cycle turning again. And in many indigenous cultures, ancestors never truly die. They live in story, land, wind. Different interpretations. The same mystery. Here's a strange, tender fact. The human brain has a built-in resistance to fully comprehending its own end. When people imagine their own death, studies show their brains react more vividly to scenarios about other people dying than themselves. Even when reading obituaries with their own name inserted, people struggle to emotionally connect. It's as if the brain gently says, "Nope, not me, not really." A self-protection glitch. A denial code baked into the operating system. And why wouldn't it be? Consciousness doesn't have an off switch that you can test. We know what a non-responsive body looks like, but the subjective experience of losing awareness, that's unreachable from the outside. No instrument can measure it. No one can report back. So we speculate. Some people who have flatlined and been revived report near-death experiences. Tunnels, light, peace, out-of-body awareness. Many describe floating above their hospital beds, watching the medical team work. Are these spiritual journeys, or elaborate hallucinations brought on by oxygen deprivation, brain chemistry, and expectation? The answer may be yes to both. Your brain is capable of astonishingly vivid internal experiences, especially when under extreme stress. During trauma, it can dissociate, projecting you into imagined safety. During near-death moments, the brain might trigger dreamlike states to protect the psyche from panic. There's no clear line between hallucination and spiritual vision when both feel absolutely real. And there's that word again, feel. Because even death isn't immune to the illusion of perception. If the final seconds of life are filled with warmth, familiarity, or peace, does it matter whether it's real? Isn't the experience still valid? Quirky detour. In some Tibetan Buddhist practices, monks meditate daily on their own death, not morbidly but mindfully. The idea is to rehearse the moment, to become familiar with the transition, to dissolve the fear. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the journey after death is described in vivid stages, like an internal dream world where the soul confronts illusions, faces mirrors, and either awakens or returns. But even in the secular world, people feel the edges of something bigger. Hospice nurses, for example, often report moments of eerie synchronicity, patients who wait to die until a loved one arrives, or who speak to unseen visitors days before passing. These aren't always explainable, but they're consistent. Maybe the mind prepares itself in ways we don't yet understand. Maybe the line between consciousness and unconsciousness is more fluid than we assume. One hypothesis floating at the edge of mainstream neuroscience is that consciousness might not be entirely confined to the brain. It sounds mystical, but it's based on the idea that the brain could act more like a receiver than a generator, tuning into a field of awareness like a radio picking up a signal. Death, in this view, isn't the destruction of the signal but the breaking of the receiver. A cool thought, unproven, unprovable maybe, but strangely comforting. Of course, not everyone finds comfort in mystery. Some prefer the clean, clinical view: death is the end. The screen goes black, there's no one left to notice, and that's fine. But even this perspective reveals something strange. The moment of death can't be experienced. You can be alive or you can be not, but you can't be aware of the transition. Consciousness, by definition, can't observe its own absence. Which leads to a philosophical mind-bender. If you don't experience death, is it real to you? Or is it just a concept, something you worry about, talk about, prepare for, but never actually meet? It might be the ultimate illusion, a boundary we're told is solid, but which, when reached, dissolves quietly, unnoticed, like falling asleep without remembering when you drifted off. So you sit here now, heart ticking, lungs drawing breath, brain humming with electricity. You're alive, and that fact is quietly astonishing. You're watching a world, feeling a body, listening to a voice that only exists for as long as your awareness holds it together. And one day that awareness will end, just like it began. But between those two mysteries, birth and death, you get to live in a shimmering illusion called now, full of light and thought and memory, and maybe that's enough. Or maybe, when the time comes, there's one last trick your brain has prepared, one final story to tell you as the curtain falls. And you'll believe it. You stare at the ceiling, thinking about everything and nothing all at once. Somewhere between existential dread and curiosity, a thought drifts in like static on an empty radio channel. What if none of this is real? Not in the philosophical sense. Not in the we all wear masks poetic way, but in the hard, digital, we live in a simulation kind of way. And just like that, you're down the rabbit hole, into one of the most haunting, fascinating, and oddly logical illusions ever proposed, the simulation hypothesis. It sounds like a sci-fi movie premise, and to be fair, The Matrix nailed the aesthetics, but this idea didn't come from a screenwriter, it came from a philosopher. In 2003, Nick Bostrom published a paper proposing that one of three things must be true. 1. Advanced civilizations never reach a point where they can simulate reality. 2. They reach that point but lose interest. Or 3. They reach it and do it. And if they do, the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the real one, which means odds are you're in one. The logic isn't as flimsy as you'd hope. We already simulate reality in crude forms, video games, virtual environments, weather models, and our simulations are improving fast. If the trend continues for centuries, if computing power keeps advancing, it's not a question of if we can simulate consciousness, but when. And once that becomes possible, why not create many? For research, for art, for nostalgia, for curiosity, maybe even by accident. Now think about the implications. If simulated beings become indistinguishable from real ones, if they feel, think, wonder, then how would they know they were simulated? If you're inside a simulation sophisticated enough to fake sensory input, build coherent physics, and edit memories on the fly, what sign would give it away? Historians still argue whether this is just modern mythology, a digital-age version of the divine dream. Ancient Hindu philosophy speaks of Maya, the grand illusion. Some versions of Buddhism describe reality as a projection of mind. Plato's cave shows people mistaking shadows for truth. And now, we have GPU-rendered forests and algorithmic faces. Same fear, different mask. But this version comes with math. Elon Musk, love him or not, once said the odds that we're not in a simulation are 1 in billions. It made headlines. Meanwhile, MIT researchers have tried testing for resolution limits in space, akin to detecting the pixels of the universe. If the simulation is running on finite resources, maybe the physics will glitch. Maybe we'll catch the seams. Quirky side note, some scientists have proposed that the fine-tuned constants of physics, why gravity is just so, why particles behave the way they do, might suggest the universe was designed to run efficiently, like a game engine optimized for performance. Too perfect to be random, not perfect enough to be infinite, just right for illusion. And you've experienced the glitches, not just technical ones, memory errors, déjà vu, coincidences too precise to be coincidence. That feeling when you walk into a room and forget why, when time bends oddly, when life feels scripted or characters seem to repeat or the story moves faster than it should. Maybe that's just brain stuff, or maybe it's lag. But let's pause. Even if we are in a simulation, what then? Is it a prison, a test, a sandbox? Maybe it's entertainment. Maybe you're the star of your own reality show. Or maybe this entire universe is background noise for one small character who really needed to learn empathy, or courage, or how to properly water their plants. Or maybe the point isn't the simulation. Maybe it's the experience. Just like a dream feels real when you're in it, maybe this reality is meant to feel real because that's the point. Meaning, feeling, discovery, those don't require physical atoms. They require belief. And belief, that's something the brain is very, very good at generating. Some physicists suggest that consciousness itself might be the key to simulation. That awareness collapses the universe into being. That observation doesn't just influence reality, it is reality. In a simulated world, consciousness might be the only thing that truly exists. The code responds to attention. The world renders because you're watching. Still, there are unanswered questions. If this is a simulation, who built it? Post-human scientists, curious aliens, a bored 12-year-old in another dimension. Some models even suggest recursive simulations, worlds within worlds, each unaware of the one above. You could be in a simulation being simulated by a simulation of a cat watching a physics lecture. And what about death? If this world is code, maybe death is just logging out, or moving to another layer, or a server reboot. That sounds poetic until you realize it doesn't change the uncertainty. Whether it's atoms or algorithms, you still don't know what happens next. The illusion remains. But here's the strangest part. Even if this is all fake, your feelings are real. Your love, your fear, your confusion, your wonder. If the simulation includes emotion, memory, connection, if it includes you, then it's already succeeded in being meaningful. You don't need realness for something to matter. You need experience. And you have that in abundance. So you sip your tea, check your phone, watch the sky turn purple behind the clouds. Maybe it's rendered, maybe it's dreamed, maybe it's the output of an unfathomable script. But it's yours. And in the absence of certainty, you return to the one truth that seems to hold. If reality is an illusion, it's the most immersive, convincing, emotionally loaded, astonishing illusion you could ever hope to inhabit. And you're doing great in it. So here you are sitting, breathing, thinking. Maybe your tea gone cold. Maybe your cat has curled up beside you, a soft anchor to something that still feels solid. After all the theories, illusions, and reality-bending possibilities, one question lingers in your mind like fog on glass. If everything might be fake, why does it still feel so real? And the answer, frustrating, beautiful, comforting in its own way, is this: because your brain is designed to make it feel real. That's its job. That's its masterpiece. That's the final illusion. You've been wandering through a funhouse of perception. Vision that fabricates, memory that edits, hearing that fills in blanks, touch that never quite touches. Senses colluding with attention and expectation to create a cohesive world that might not exist beyond your interpretation of it. But despite all that, the world still matters to you. You still care. You still cry when the dog dies in the movie. You still get chills during sunsets, fall in love, worry about bills. Why? Because your emotional reality is real to you, even if its foundation is fog. Let's get concrete for a moment. Neuroscience tells us that our perception of the world is a construction, not a mirror, not a direct line to what is, but a live, improvisational theater inside your skull. The stage crew includes everything from sensory data and emotional memory to dopamine circuits and social scripts. It's chaotic, it's biased, it's gloriously human. But here's the wild part. It doesn't need to be accurate to be meaningful. It just needs to be useful. Your brain's goal isn't truth, it's survival, connection, story. It builds a coherent world so you can move through it without falling downstairs, getting eaten, or spending your whole life debating whether your couch is a simulation. The illusion of solidity, helpful. The illusion of time, necessary. The illusion of self, vital. These are functional fictions, delusions that work. Like a magic show so convincing the magician forgets they're on stage. Historians still argue whether ancient philosophers saw the illusion of reality as a problem to be solved or a gift to be accepted. Was Plato's cave an allegory for escaping delusion, or a warning that truth might be unbearable? In Eastern traditions, from Zen to Vedanta, the idea isn't to destroy the illusion, but to see it clearly and then live in it well. Enlightenment, in many teachings, is not about escaping the dream, but realizing it is a dream and dreaming it with compassion. Quirky fact: some neuroscientists now believe that our experience of consciousness is like a controlled hallucination, not metaphorically, literally. Your brain constantly predicts what the next moment should feel like, look like, sound like, and then updates based on the incoming data. Most of the time, the predictions match the world and all is well. But when they don't, we get confusion, surprise, sometimes awe. You live on the knife's edge between expectation and update. And that's why reality feels real. Not because it is, in any objective sense, but because your brain is constantly smoothing, balancing, blending perception and prediction until the illusion is seamless. You feel touch because of electromagnetic pushback. You see color because your brain assigns it to certain wavelengths. You feel you because a bundle of neural systems keeps updating a story of self that changes slightly with every breath. And still, it works. It works because meaning doesn't need metaphysical certainty. The laughter you shared with a friend isn't erased just because time is a construct. The tears you shed when something beautiful hit you in the heart aren't invalid just because your senses are fallible. If reality is an illusion, it's the kind that can love you back, that can bruise, that can dance, that can whisper this matters, even when the science says it shouldn't. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not that we might live in a simulation, or that atoms are mostly empty space, or that particles decide their state when observed. The miracle is that despite all of it, you feel something. You wake up. You make tea. You notice light on the wall. You wonder what happens after you die. You laugh at weird dreams. You carry pain and joy in equal measure. And somewhere in all of that chaos, a story keeps unfolding. You don't have to solve the illusion. You just have to live it, wake up in it, see its patterns, let it move you, not because it's real, but because you are. Even if you is just another hallucination. Even if your life is made of stories stacked on stories, stitched together by electricity and memory and moonlight. Even if the world you love is a painting on the inside of your skull, endlessly edited and never quite finished. You live in a dream of atoms and time and selfhood, a beautifully rigged hallucination, a simulation built from emotion and breath and attention. And that's not depressing. That's freedom. Because it means you can choose what parts of the illusion you nourish, which stories you amplify, which ones you gently let go. So tonight, when you blink into the soft blur of your room, remember, it doesn't have to be real to be yours. The illusion holds, the lights dim, the story continues. And you're still here, dreaming it all into being.